My sister slid the folder across the kitchen table before I even took off my coat. "Sign these," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Dad's accounts need to be consolidated under one manager. You've always been too busy to help anyway, so I figured I'd just handle it." My mother nodded from the stove, stirring something she wasn't looking at either. "It makes sense, sweetheart. Your sister has been here." "You haven't." I pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. I did not reach for the folder. I just looked at my sister, at the careful way she'd arranged the papers, at the little sticky arrow tabs she'd placed on every signature line. She had done this before. She had practiced this moment. I could tell by the way she wasn't nervous at all. "Of course," I said. "Let me read through it first." "There's nothing to read through. It's standard consolidation paperwork." I smiled and placed my hand flat on the folder without opening it. "Then it won't take long for me to read." She finally looked up. There was something in her eyes that wasn't quite annoyance. It was closer to calculation. Like a person rechecking math they were sure they'd already solved. Outside, the November sky over our parents' neighborhood was the color of old concrete, the kind of gray that settles in and doesn't leave until April. I had driven 4 hours to be here for our father's birthday dinner. I had told myself the whole drive that I was going to keep my mouth shut, eat the pot roast, and go home. That was before I saw the folder, and before I knew what I already knew. Let me tell you what my family believed about me. They believed I worked in insurance. That was technically true. I worked for a title insurance underwriting firm as a senior fraud examiner. I had been doing it for 6 years. What that meant, in practice, was that I spent my days finding the moments where the paperwork lied, where a signature appeared that shouldn't have, where a notary stamp belonged to someone who had retired 2 years prior, where a deed of trust had been recorded against a property that the supposed owner had never actually agreed to encumber. I was, in the plainest possible terms, someone who found forgeries for a living. My family did not know this, not the specifics. To my mother, insurance was insurance, which was boring, which meant I was boring. To my father, before his stroke 18 months ago, all that mattered was that I wasn't losing money. And to my sister, who had positioned herself as the family's indispensable adult child the moment our father's health declined, I was simply irrelevant. A name on a holiday card. A face that showed up twice a year and offered opinions no one had asked for. She had spent the last 18 months building a very careful architecture of control. She moved back into our parents' house. She took over their grocery shopping and their pharmacy runs and their doctor appointments. She answered the phone when the accountant called. She smiled at the neighbors and accepted their casseroles and reported back to my mother on which of them had asked about my father's condition. She was devoted. She was present. She was, by every visible measure, a good daughter. And she had been stealing from them for 14 months. I did not find out by accident. I found out because my job required me to run title searches on properties before their debt was acquired by institutional buyers. 8 months ago, a flagged file crossed my desk at work. A deed of trust recorded against a residential property at 4 Clover Hill Road, Millhaven, Connecticut. The property address was familiar in the way that only your childhood home can be familiar. The borrower listed was my father. The notarization date was 11 weeks after his stroke left him unable to hold a pen with his right hand. My father is right-handed. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 22 minutes that afternoon before I drove home. I did not call my mother. I did not call my sister. I called no one. I just drove home and I sat in my apartment and I thought about the word that was forming in my mind, the word I did not want to apply to my own sister, and then I accepted it, and I went to work. What my sister had done was not subtle. That was the thing that surprised me most. She had taken out a home equity line of credit against our parents' house using a power of attorney document she had drafted herself and had notarized by a woman named Deborah, who was the wife of her friend's brother and who was, as I later confirmed, not a licensed notary in the state of Connecticut. The HELOC was for $85,000. By the time I found the filing, $61,000 of it had already been drawn down. She had also, separately, liquidated a CD that belonged jointly to both of my parents, redirecting the proceeds into a business checking account for an LLC she had formed 6 months earlier. An LLC with a registered agent address at a UPS store in a strip mall 20 minutes from our parents' house. I drove past it once, on a weekend, just to see it. Just to make the reality of it feel real. The LLC was called Serenity Property Solutions. I have to give her this. The name was almost funny. Over the next 7 months, I did not confront her. I did not call her, not to talk about any of this. I came home for Easter and I ate the ham, and I helped my mother with the dishes. and I watched my sister refill my father's water glass and tuck the straw a little closer to his hand, and I felt something very complicated move through me that I did not have a word for. It was not admiration. It was not sympathy. It was something more like watching a very talented actress in a role she had been rehearsing her whole life and understanding, for the first time, that the performance had always been for an audience that wasn't me. What I was doing during those 7 months was gathering. I ordered full title reports. I pulled the HELOC file through a contact at the county recorder's office. I obtained a copy of the power of attorney through a public records request and had it reviewed by a handwriting analyst I had used twice before for work. Her conclusion, delivered in a 3-page report with footnotes, was that the signature purporting to be my father's had been produced by someone other than the named grantor, with a probability of analytical certainty she rated at 94%. I also reached out, quietly, through a broker I knew, to the private lending firm that held the HELOC on my parents' house. The lender was a small operation out of Hartford called Meridian Residential Capital. They were not having a good year. Their non-performing loan ratio had climbed, their primary backer had pulled a line of credit, and 3 of their 7 active HELOCs were delinquent, including the one on Clover Hill Road. My sister had stopped making payments 4 months in. Through a blind acquisition vehicle I had spent 3 months setting up with the help of a transactional attorney, I purchased the non-performing note on my parents' house from Meridian for 62 cents on the dollar. I owned my parents' mortgage. I had been their landlord for 6 weeks before I drove to Connecticut for my father's birthday dinner. The folder my sister slid across the table contained 3 documents. The first was a durable power of attorney granting her sole authority over both of my parents' financial affairs. The second was a beneficiary designation change for my father's life insurance policy, redirecting the primary benefit from my mother to my sister's LLC. The third was a consolidation agreement that would roll my parents' remaining savings account into a joint account, requiring only her signature for withdrawal. She needed me to sign as a witness on the first document. That was why I was there. Not for the birthday dinner. She needed my signature to make the POA look like it had been executed with the family's knowledge and consent. She had invited me home to use me. I set the folder back on the table without opening it. "I'll look at this after dinner," I said. My mother brought the pot roast to the table, and my father was helped into his chair by a weekend aide named Gerald, who had been with the family for 5 months. My father was thinner than the last time I had seen him. He had that particular kind of thinness that doesn't happen from dieting. His eyes were still clear, still tracking, still him. He squeezed my hand when I leaned down to hug him, and he held it for a moment longer than usual. "You came," he said. "Of course I came," I said. My sister watched this from across the table with the expression of someone observing a transaction they have not approved. Dinner was civil in the way that dinners are civil when everyone at the table knows something is wrong and has collectively decided not to name it. My mother talked about the neighbors. My sister talked about a contractor she had hired to repaint the garage. I asked my father about the physical therapy, and he told me his grip was getting stronger, and he demonstrated by squeezing my hand again. And my sister changed the subject to dessert. After the cake, after my father had been helped back to his chair in the living room, after my mother had started on the dishes, my sister followed me into the hallway. "You didn't sign the folder," she said. "Not yet. I need those back tonight. The attorney has a filing deadline." "Which attorney?" She paused. "Robert Feeney. He's been handling Dad's affairs." I knew Robert Feeney. He was a general practice attorney in town who had done my parents' original wills 15 years ago and had not, to my knowledge, been involved in anything related to my parents' finances since. I also knew, because I had called his office 3 weeks prior under a pretext, that he had not drafted any of the documents currently sitting in that folder. "I'd like to call Robert before I sign anything," I said. "It's a Saturday night. Then I'll call him Monday." Her jaw tightened. "Why are you making this difficult? I have been here. I have been managing everything. I have been the one driving Dad to appointments and talking to the insurance company and handling every single thing that you have been too absent to deal with. All I'm asking for is the legal authority to do officially what I'm already doing." "I know," I said. "So sign the papers. I'll call Robert on Monday." She stared at me for a long moment. The calculation in her eyes sharpened into something else, something closer to the recognition that the math might not be working the way she thought. "You've always done this," she said. "You've always swooped in at the last second with your opinions and your questions and your need to complicate everything. Mom and Dad have been waiting for you to show up and be part of this family for years. And when you finally do, all you bring is obstruction." "I'm not obstructing anything," I said. "I'm reading the paperwork." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. You work in insurance. What do you know about estate documents? I looked at her for a moment. I thought about telling her then. I considered it genuinely. The way you consider a shortcut you already know you're not going to take. Then I thought about the notary stamp that belonged to a woman who wasn't licensed. I thought about $61,000. I thought about my father's right hand squeezing mine. I'll see you at breakfast, I said, and went upstairs to the guest room. I had arranged for someone to be at the house the next morning. His name was Daniel, and he was not, as my sister would be told, a representative from Meridian Residential Capital. That was technically his title. But he was also a former investigator with the State Attorney General's office who had moved to private practice and who had, at my request, prepared a very specific set of documents and a very specific agenda for a Sunday morning conversation. I had timed it for 10 o'clock, when I knew my father would be at physical therapy with Gerald, and my mother would be at her weekly church service, which she had not missed in 31 years. My sister was in the kitchen when Daniel knocked. She answered the door with the polished efficiency of a woman who had spent 18 months presenting herself as the household's competent adult. She was dressed well, hair done, coffee in hand. She looked, I will give her that, entirely like someone who had nothing to hide. Can I help you? Daniel handed her a business card. Good morning. I'm with Meridian Residential Capital. I'm sorry to come by on a Sunday, but we've been having trouble reaching anyone on the contact number we have on file. We've sent several notices about the status of the home equity account. My sister's hand tightened on the door. I'm aware of the account. I've been handling it. Yes, we've noted your correspondence. Unfortunately, the note on this property entered default status 43 days ago, and under the terms of the agreement, we are required to begin the formal remediation process. We do need to speak with the property owners directly. I have power of attorney. We're aware you submitted a document to that effect. We have some questions about that document, actually. Could I come in? She let him in because she didn't know how not to without making it worse. I was sitting at the kitchen table when they came through the doorway. My sister stopped. She looked at me the way people look at things that should not be possible, the way you look at a chair that has moved on its own. The reassessment happened fast. I could see it. The rapid recalculation of what my presence in this house meant and what I might know, and whether the math she had been doing for 14 months still held. What is this? She said. Sit down, I said. I'm not going to sit down. What is he doing here? Who called you? Sit down, I said again. Please, I'd like to show you something. She didn't sit. She stood at the edge of the kitchen with her coffee and her very good posture, and she looked at me with an expression that was trying very hard to be offended but was actually afraid. I opened my laptop. Document 1, I said. The deed of trust, recorded against this property on March 14th of last year. The borrower's signature is dated 11 weeks after Dad's stroke. I pulled up the handwriting analysis report. Document 2, an independent analysis by a certified forensic document examiner. The signature on the power of attorney you submitted to Meridian does not match any verified sample of Dad's signature from before his stroke. The probability it was signed by someone else is 94%. Her face had gone the color of the November sky outside. Document 3, I said. The LLC registration for Serenity Property Solutions. Formation date. 7 months before you submitted the fraudulent POA. Registered agent address. A UPS store. The $61,000 drawn from Mom and Dad's HELOC was transferred in 9 separate withdrawals to this LLC's business checking account. 9, which is one more than the federal structuring threshold, which I'm sure was not a coincidence. You don't know what you're talking about, she said. Her voice was doing something it had never done in any argument we had ever had. It was shaking. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been doing this for 6 years. I paused. I find forgeries for a living. Not insurance. Title fraud. Document fraud. Forgery. I watched her process this. I'm sorry I never explained it better at Thanksgiving. Daniel placed a folder on the table. He had been standing quietly by the doorway this whole time, giving her no one to look at except me. There's something else, I said. The note on this house. The HELOC that you haven't been paying. Meridian sold it. Sold it to who? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit there for a moment, the way you let something steep. I thought about every Sunday phone call where she told my mother I was too focused on work to come home. I thought about the birthday dinners I had missed, because I had been made to feel my presence was an inconvenience. I thought about my father's hand, thin and warm around mine, and the way he had said you came like it was something he hadn't been sure of. They sold it to me, I said. She set down her coffee. very carefully, the way people set things down when they're worried their hands might not cooperate. I own the note on Mom and Dad's house, I said, which means I control the default remediation process, which means I decide what happens next. You can't, she said. You can't do this to our family. You did this to our family, I said. I'm just the one who has the documentation. I placed 2 sheets of paper on the table and turned them toward her. Option 1, I said. I file a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office, which Daniel here is going to help me do. The fraudulent POA becomes a criminal matter. The structured withdrawals get referred to FinCEN. The forged beneficiary change gets flagged to the insurance commissioner. You will need an attorney. A good one. The kind that costs more than $61,000. She was looking at the papers but not reading them. Option 2, I said. You sign a full restitution agreement. Every dollar returned to Mom and Dad's accounts within 90 days. The LLC is dissolved. You relinquish any claim to be their authorized representative. I bring in a licensed fiduciary to manage their affairs going forward. You can still visit. You can still be their daughter. But you don't touch the money. You don't touch the paperwork. You don't touch any document with their names on it ever again. And the criminal complaint? She said. If every dollar is returned, and you sign the dissolution agreement, and there is no further contact with their financial accounts, I will not file. You'd let me just walk away. I'd let Mom and Dad keep their home, I said. That's not the same thing. She stood very still for a long time. Outside, a car passed on the street. The refrigerator hummed. I could hear the forced air coming through the vent under the cabinet. The same sound that house had made my entire childhood. The sound of being indoors when it was cold outside. They won't believe you, she said. I've been here. I've been taking care of them. They'll take my side. Maybe, I said. But the handwriting analyst report doesn't have a side. The bank records don't have a side. The notary records from the state licensing board, showing that Deborah hasn't been licensed since 2019, don't have a side. I leaned forward slightly. You built your case on paper. So did I. And mine is real. She looked at me then. Not with calculation, not with the practiced irritation she used at family dinners when she wanted to dismiss me. She looked at me the way you look at someone when you realize you have fundamentally and completely misread them for a very long time. You've been planning this, she said. I've been documenting it, I said. There's a difference. Planning implies I wanted this to happen. What I wanted was for the notary stamp to be real and the signature to be his, and the LLC to be something other than what it is. I spent 2 months hoping I was wrong. Something moved across her face that might have been, in other circumstances, something I could have called grief. Sign the restitution agreement, I said. Take the 90 days. Make it right. She picked up the pen from the table, the one I had placed there before she came downstairs, and for a moment she just held it. Then she signed. Her handwriting was neat, controlled, the handwriting of a woman who had always been good at looking like she had everything together. She signed her name on the restitution agreement, and on the dissolution notice, and on the authorization form, releasing her as a named representative on all of my parents' accounts. Daniel gathered the documents into his folder. I'll have the fiduciary contact information to you by Wednesday, he said to me, and showed himself out. We sat in the kitchen without speaking for a moment. The house was very quiet. I would have given you money, I said. If you had asked me, if you had called me and said you were struggling, I would have helped. She didn't say anything to that. The difference between us, I said, standing and picking up my bag, is that I never needed to take it. I walked into the living room and I stood in front of my father's chair, the big green one he had owned since before I was born, and I straightened the pillow behind it. I checked that the small table beside it had his water glass, his reading glasses, his phone with the large text display I had set up for him 2 years ago on a visit my sister had not known about. Then I went back to the front hallway and put on my coat. My sister appeared in the doorway to the kitchen. She did not look like herself. She looked like a version of herself with most of the software running in the background suddenly switched off. Smaller, quieter, real, in a way she rarely was. What are you going to tell them? She asked. The truth, I said. All of it, when Dad is well enough to understand it. I buttoned the top button of my coat. But not today. Today is his birthday. I opened the front door and the cold air came in, sharp and clean and immediate. The kind of cold that makes everything suddenly very clear. You should call a therapist, I said. A real one, not Deborah. And I walked out. The street was empty, the way suburban streets are empty on Sunday mornings in November. Everyone inside and warm and behind their windows. My car was parked at the curb where I had left it the night before. Gray and ordinary looking. Nothing that would tell you anything about the person who drove it. I sat in the driver's seat for a minute before starting the engine. I was not triumphant. I want to be precise about that because it matters. There is a version of this story where I felt powerful walking out that door, where the satisfaction of the previous hour smoothed over everything underneath it. That is not what I felt. What I felt was the specific, exhausting weight of being right about something you desperately wanted to be wrong about. I thought about my father's hand around mine. I thought about the way he said you came. I started the car. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat as I pulled out of the driveway. A text from my mother. Coming back from church early. Will there be enough cake? I pulled over at the end of the block and typed back. There's plenty. I'll be back in an hour. I just went to grab more coffee. Then I drove to the end of Clover Hill Road and sat there for a moment, looking in the rearview mirror at the house. The gray cape with the green shutters and the rose bush my mother had planted the year I was born. Stripped bare now for winter. Just the canes showing. Just the skeleton of the thing still standing. $61,000. 14 months. A notary who wasn't licensed and a signature that wasn't his. You build things slowly and you lose them fast. My sister had spent 18 months making herself indispensable, and she had done it by becoming dangerous. And she had done it because she thought no one was watching, which was the same mistake everyone in that house had been making about me for 30 years. I thought about the folder she had slid across the table, the little sticky arrow tabs on every signature line, the careful architecture of it. I had been the invisible daughter. I had been the boring one, the distant one, the one who worked in insurance and never came home enough and didn't understand what it meant to be present for a family in crisis. I was also the one who owned their house now. I thought about calling it even. I thought about the particular silence that follows the end of something you've been carrying for a long time, the way it isn't really quiet at all, just differently loud. Then I put the car in drive and went to get my mother her coffee. The restitution came in full, in 3 installments, over the next 87 days. I did not file a complaint. I hired a licensed fiduciary named Carol who had 17 years of experience and a voice like an elementary school principal, and who my father decided he liked immediately because she didn't talk down to him. My sister moved into a 1-bedroom rental in a town 40 minutes away. She calls my mother on Sundays. She has not called me. I come home once a month now. I help my father with his physical therapy exercises, the ones for his right hand, and he squeezes my fingers and tells me his grip is getting stronger, and I tell him I know, and I mean it. Some investments take a long time to pay out. The patient ones always do.